Welcome to Wine Soundtrack Australia. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world.
In 30 ounces, discover their stories, personalities and passions.
Hello friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. My name is Priscilla Hennicum and I am here with Geoff Hardy from K1 by Geoff Hardy Wines. So Geoff, how are you today?
Fabulous, thanks Priscilla. Yeah, really cool.
So tell us, where are you located?
I'm in the Adelaide Hills at the K1 vineyard, which is a 35-year-old vineyard down by the Kuitpo area inland from McLaren Vale.
So how many hectares of land do you have?
We've got 45 hectares under vines up here on about 80 hectares of land. So it's quite a large property with half of it planted to vines.
That's so cool. So how many bottles a year do you produce?
We're processing about 300 tonnes. Most of it is going under our label, so we're about 25,000 dozen.
Great. So what type of wine or which types of grapes are you actually growing here in the property?
This is something that I've been renowned for because I've planted 23 different varieties up here. We started with the traditional Australian varieties, Shiraz and Cabernet. We came up here because it's a much cooler climate than McLaren Vale or the Barossa, so we thought we'd better try some earlier ripening varieties, and we started with the Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, of course, and then we moved to Grüne Veltliner and Gewürztraminer and things like Tirol and Lagrange. So we've got quite a large range of varieties, but primarily it's still Shiraz and Cabernet, traditional Australian varieties, yeah.
Tell us about Grüne Veltliner and how growing here in Adelaide Hills.
Yeah, I fell in love with the variety in Austria sort of in the late 90s or 97, 98, and we found that we could import some new clones, and we found one clone in Tasmania, so we've now got a few hectares of the variety, a couple of different clones, and we put it on some shaly ground to give the flinty character that we loved in Austria. And those wines are looking stunning. We've had them there for 10 years, I think. Well, 2007 we planted first, and the wines are sensational.
Sounds so good. I'm going to try something Grüne Veltliner afterwards. I hope so. So about sales, how the percentage between domestic market and overseas?
Yeah, we've been more than 50% overseas with the China situation at the moment. That's tapered off, but we're still selling well into Canada and other Southeast Asian countries, and a little bit into the UK and a little bit into Germany. So we're well spread around the world.
Sounds good. What do you think about with the Chinese market has been declining for Australian wines? What's your plan from now?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it was a big surprise to us all that there would be such a large tax put on our wines going into China. So it's kind of hard to see where the finish of it will be. So we're looking now at many other Southeast Asian countries, and we've increased our sales into Ireland and Canada. So we're overcoming the problem.
So good to hear that. I hope you get a very successful in your business. So Geoff, I wanted to talk more about you. What is your first memory relevant of wine? Do you have any good story to talking to our listeners when some memory you have very relevant of wine in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my family's been in the wine game for 180 years, and my grandmother, Eileen Hardy, who you may know as one of the labels of the old Hardy family company, is Eileen Hardy, and she brought us up. I mean, being my grandma and looking after us when Mum and Dad were flitting around the world, she'd make sure that from a very early age we were well trained to drink red wine, particularly. She was a great fan of the reds, and we enjoyed a glass with every meal. And she used to tell some lovely stories about her beginnings in the wine industry, where she joined by marrying Thomas Hardy many moons before. So it started very early. We were trained on wine right from birth, basically. Yeah, very good.
So your life always was in the wine industry, yeah? So you just growing this passion since you were young?
Well, I had 3 older brothers that were all in the wine industry. One was training in France and another living in France and working over there. So I thought I'd better do something else because 3 of them in wine industry. So I did engineering, but whilst I was doing engineering, I fell in love with wine even more. So I started planting vines in McLaren Vale and then now up here in the Adelaide Hills. And it's just such a wonderful industry to be involved with. It takes you from earthy stuff right through to some fabulous meals and some fabulous places all around the world. So we just love it.
Do you believe in a perfect variety?
Oh dear, I mean, it's always dependent upon the year. We thought that the Cabernet Sauvignon on this property was the icon variety, and of course with Gruner absolutely singing and winning trophies all over the place, we're sort of now favouring the Gruner, but it always depends on the season. And some years the Pinot Noir is our favourite, and having 23 varieties means that one's a star every year, and usually 4 or 5 are just sensational. So it's always and it's the time of the day that you're drinking wine. You just have to go with the flow and choose the wine that you need and want. Yeah.
So what's the grape variety for 2021? Like actually outstanding.
Okay. Well, the Pertaringa is one of my favourite varieties, and that along with La Graine, both from Alto Adige, they are new to Australia, and we're getting some awesome flavours that we don't see in Shiraz and Cabernet, and we think that they have a great future up here in this climate, it's about 1200 degree days, so it's quite a bit cooler, maybe 300 or 400 degree days cooler than Barossa. So it suits those higher altitude varieties,
So if you need to describe it for our listeners, the difference between Shiraz and Pertaringa, how would you like to describe?
Yeah, well, Shiraz, as you probably know, we've got so many different climates we grow Shiraz in, so you get some very peppery Rhone-esque styles in the cooler climates. The Pertaringa has some wonderful citrus background flavours and some lovely blue fruit, which blueberry and the like, which is not seen in Shiraz. Shiraz is more voluptuous, sweeter fruit. Pertaringa is more savoury, and it's just a lovely variety. I mean, we don't see the sorts of flavours that it has in any of the varieties that we've had in Australia.
Sounds good. So it looks like we actually have some very good news for 2021. So very different wines. And do you have a cellar?
Oh yes, we have a cellar at my old house in Clarendon, which my daughter's looking after. It's 140 dozen of going back 35 years of our production and many years of our family production in the old Hardy Family Wine Company. So down here at K1 we have 3 cellars. We have a museum cellar, and we have my underground cellar at my treehouse, and also here in the lake house. So we've got a good selection and we make sure that we've got it in different spots, so that if any of them come on, suffer a fire or something, we've always got stock. Yeah.
What is the most expensive bottle in your cellar?
Oh, okay. I think it's probably one of the Granges. I mean, there's probably 8 vintages of Grange, and I'd say each of those would be the most expensive wines.
So Australia wine there.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly. I've got an 82 Mouton Rothschild, so I mean, there's that's worth a lot of money too. So, yeah, there's not too many left of those that were very expensive, because we have some good nights and they have to be drunk.
Sounds good to me. Have a question. Just imagine someone like a VIP or famous actor drink your wine overseas and have like a bottle of K1 Geoff Hardy. Which VIP or actor you would like to see drinking your wine?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, there's so many that you'd love to see drinking our wine overseas. I mean, we've been in film in New York a couple of times in filming that Scott Hicks did, Snow Falling on Cedars and No Reservations. Yeah, I think I'd take just about any of the great actors, quite frankly.
When you were little, Geoff, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I mean, I was always building things, so I had built 2 or 3 motorbikes, and then I built some cars for different people, and so it became engineering. But then as I was doing that, I was drinking wine from the family vineyards, and I just couldn't help but fall in love. I wanted to get out of the oil and grease and into the long-term wine game.
So your family is quite well known in the wine industry in Australia, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, my great-great-grandfather came over here in 1850, and by 1853 he'd driven cattle to the goldfields in Victoria and butchered them, sold them for meat, and made some money. So he came back and bought land and started planting vines. So he was very creative and hard-working. He managed to have the biggest wine company in Australia by 1904. When one of the wineries burnt down, but everything was put back together again, and so the company grew and remained one of the greats of Australia, the Hardy Wine Company.
Yeah, it's very well known in the world. Question, because I know your winemaker is a chef qualified as well. Have you ever paired white wine with meat? Or white or red wine with fish?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends so much on the styles of cooking. I mean, with Asian, with Thai or whatever, you'll find that Pinot and the Gruner Veltliner and certainly Arnaise and Sauvignon Blanc go very well. So there's a red with fish, and quite often with dark, a Gruner Veltliner is, again, because of the mouthfeel, it's quite a voluptuous white, even with the flintiness, and so that goes with a number of red meats. Not heavy red meats, though. I mean, more the lighter styles of cooking.
Do you have any rules for pairing wine and food?
Yeah, really, it's up to the individual, because I mean, there's those that would like to drink their white with an ice cube or whatever. So we're very much driven by the consumer that, no one's absolutely right. You just go with what people like and want. I mean, obviously here at the Cellar Door, we'll serve our Chardonnay at 12 degrees or thereabouts, and the sparkling down at 4 or 5 degrees. So, there's that sort of rule, but traditionally the reds can be drunk between, 18 and 25 degrees sort of thing, yeah.
What's your favorite style of wine? Red, white, fortified, sparkling?
Again, depends on the day. We used to drink a bottle of vintage port at every tennis day at Mark Maxwell's place, and that was our favourite wine that night always, because you drink them from 100 years old to 5 years old. So it depends on who you're with, what the food is, and the situation as to which wine you love. And it often turns out to be Cabernet towards the end of a meal for me. When you're having a main course of red meats and that, I'm usually falling in love with a Cabernet at that stage.
Question for you. How many glasses or bottles needed to get you drunk?
Oh God. I mean, if you start at, the early part of the day, that is lunchtime, let's say, then there might be 3 bottles in it before it's. But certainly in one meal, I think 1 or 2 bottles is enough.
And if you actually drink too much in the last night, and then what did you do for recover yourself after one bad hit hungover?
Yeah, I mean, it's always important, I think, in the morning to have food, because an empty stomach is not good for hangover, really. So we often use Vegemite on toast with tomato and pepper on top, quite a lot of black pepper. That's pretty cool for getting over hangovers.
Do you want to tell us what the Vegemite is? Because I probably have a lot of listeners around the world that don't really know what it is.
I mean, it's a very, very concentrated form of yeast, let's just say. So it's dried, so it is a powerful flavour, as is Promite and Marmite. I mean, there's a range of the same product, and it's a very yummy.
Very Australian, right?
It is. Vegemite is particularly Australian.
And for breakfast, it's traditional.
Exactly. It is very traditional. From early in my life, I've always had it on the table.
Tell us as well, when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
I love the vineyard, and so I find that, I do play a little bit of golf as well, but I find myself travelling around vineyards around Australia and the world just to get to know how other people do things, and also taste their product. So yeah, the game is, wine game gives you travel experiences like no other game, really. It's fabulous.
I have a question as well, like for the older days. Do you still remember where did you go on your first date?
Oh, first date.
Or maybe second.
Yeah. First date's usually a school dance or whatever, that sort of thing. But certainly when you leave school, then I'd find myself over in Melbourne or something with my lady, and we'd be visiting some Stephanie's or a restaurant over there. It's just so many different beautiful restaurants to go to, that's for sure.
So, if I tell you the sentence, complete the sentence. A table without wine is like?
Sometimes it's necessary when you've had too many the day before. It's hard going, let's just say. It's not as much fun.
Always will be fun to have a table, wine on the table.
Yeah. AFD and an alcohol-free day is something that's quite necessary for me, at least once or twice a month.
Yeah, it's necessary just to keep in balance.
Yeah, that's right. It gets your system back in tune.
If your wine was a song, which one would it be?
Probably Genesis, Romeo and Juliet.
Wow, good. Now is pretty much we started with the vintage, because in February, March, it's pretty much what we start here in April is the 3 months of vintage here in Australia. So do you have any good lucky ritual for when the harvest is about to start?
Yeah, we picked our first Gewürztraminer on Tuesday this week, so 2 days ago, and which is to make a zesty fresh style at 10.7 Beaumay. Then we will be picking again sparkling this Sunday, so we'll be taking Chardonnay off for sparkling, and then we go back into the Gewürztraminer, so late next week. And because we have so many varieties, we're always picking for the next 3 months. We often pick in June with the botrytis. So our Riesling and sometimes Semillon, we pick very late for botrytis.
Oh wow, that sounds so good. So how do you? It's very small production, yeah, for botrytis.
Yeah, I mean we often only 2 tons, but sometimes up to 5 or 6 tons. But of course, the production of botrytis is half the litres per tonne because the extraction rate is low. But it makes beautiful wine up here. I mean, we've won 3 trophies each year for the last 3 years up until 19 anyway, for our botrytis sweet wine.
Yeah, botrytis is delicious. I love it. So if you think about the future, what do you believe the people in the year 2300, what the sort of wine the people will start to drink?
Yeah, I think if you look at the trends, I mean, red wines, really fruit-driven red wines rather than oak-driven red wines are sort of where I think the market is going. It's the most pleasurable with food, and so I suspect that'll be the way it grows, and hopefully the numbers of drinkers increase and we all enjoy ourselves more.
And what do you think about the warmer climates in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we're in Kuitpo up here in the Adelaide Hills because it started getting a little bit too warm for some varieties down in McLaren Vale even. Like, we certainly found that Merlot was too early a variety, and then Pinot you certainly couldn't plant down there because it just doesn't make good wine. It's too high pH, and so we came into the hills. So I'm thinking this climate change, well, watching what happened from 1980 through to 2000, where we found that the grapes were ripening 3 weeks earlier and ripening too quickly with not quite enough flavour and a higher pH. We thought we better stick to the later varieties. Like down there, Grenache is wonderful because it ripens that little bit later and handles the heat beautifully. And Shiraz does well too. But up here we needed to, and I think in the world we need to find the slightly cooler climates to avoid the effects of climate change.
Have you done anything in your vineyards for avoid any problem with the climate change?
Yeah, we do. We're very conscious of creating a little bit of leaf cover on probably 3/4 of the varieties up here. So it's more to do with trimming timing, canopy management or placement of the leaves. But I mean, we have sprayed with sunscreen. That is compound to it's just a clay to put on the berries to stop the sun from baking the skin. But we found that was not necessary once we got the canopy management right.
Good. A lot of the things to think about when you start climate start to change. So you just mentioned that before, like you're very interested to know about different wine making areas, the wine regions around the road. Do you have any specific wine regions you'd like to explore?
I mean, because of my relationship with my brothers, having lived in France for quite significant periods of their lives, we've just loved travelling around and looking at all the different options or all the different vineyard areas in France. Now, that's not to say that we just love every wine region. I mean, South Africa and Italy, Spain, we've had great times and great wines in all of those regions, so I wouldn't want to pick out one. It's just that it happens to be that we've had more time in France looking at regions, and when you go into Burgundy, it's like a garden, the whole place. It's just so beautifully manicured, and then Bordeaux has its places, and Saint-Emilion is one of the prettiest little places in the world, as well as making lovely, lovely wines. So, we're just spoiled, really.
Geoff, I would like to play a game with you.
All right, okay.
If I tell you the grape, you need to just tell the song that actually pair it or goes well with the grape. Or if you don't remember the name of the song, you can just sing.
Yeah, okay. You start with the grape. Just see how we go.
So, if I tell you Shiraz.
Shiraz, K, Shiraz, Shiraz, whatever will be. I mean, you can't help it, it's just rhymes. So I won't even go into the name of that because I don't really know it. But anyway, yeah, what's next?
So if Pinot Noir, so which song goes well with Pinot Noir?
Yeah, it's such a serious variety, even though it's fruity. So you'd have to think of something really, really fruity as a song. I'm not really good in this area. I'm afraid I should know more songs. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so if we talk about Cabernet Sauvignon is strong, like more tannins, more acidity.
I feel like it's something very classical, something like Beethoven's Fifth or something like that. You know, that's Cabernet.
And Riesling is quite delicate, quite citrus.
Yeah, that's right. I'm thinking that it's something, I can't think of what it would be. This is not my strength, trying to relate music with wine. I just know what I love when it's playing, you know.
Probably you know that grape variety, Grona. So probably you have something like special to tell us.
I've never been asked to relate music with the grape, but I mean, with Gruner again, it'd be something like Handel, or again, it's a classical sort of variety. And being from Austria, you can't help but think that it should be an Austrian composer or something like that. Yeah.
So Gruner with Austria.
Austrian classical music. Yeah.
Cool. Chardonnay, it's another very well known around the world.
Yeah.
And you make good Chardonnays as well.
Well, Chardonnay is now the premium white around the world. I mean, the Americans took it on as their favourite white in probably the late 70s and early 80s, and we were drinking both Chardonnays from the traditional districts in France, as well as those early ones in the States, and then we started planting Chardonnay in 77 in Australia, and there was a little bit in the Hunter, a little bit in Yarra prior to that, but our style has been changing the way we make it. We pick the grapes a little bit earlier these days, and we use better oak, and we do a lot more lees stirring, and there's a lot more fun in making it stylistically better, a lot more flint and longevity, like more the sort of Chablis through to Burgundian styles. Yeah.
Good. So did you like your interview, Geoff?
Yeah, that's been great. I mean, it's great to have someone beautiful like you interviewing me. It's fabulous. Thanks, Priscilla.
Give us a vote from 1 to 10.
Oh, it's got to be in the 9s, isn't it? The 10's a hard number to get.
So...
It's 10.
10? 10 is good. Thank you very much, Geoff Hardy. Would you like it to remind how to reach your cellar door here in Australia and your website address, please?
Okay. My website address is winesbygeoffhardy.com, and K1 Winery is in the southern Adelaide Hills. So, of course, our Google will send you there. I mean, it is just inland from McLaren Vale and 40 minutes south of Adelaide.
Great. Thank you so much, Geoff.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack Australia. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.